Bienvenidos amigos, amigas. Estamos de vuelta aquí en este espacio llamado On The Clock en un episodio especial porque aquí el día de hoy vamos a platicar con un invitado que traemos para platicar de draft. Pero pues antes que nada nos presentamos Luis Obregón y Diego Lozano. ¿Cómo estás, Diego?
Estoy feliz, estoy emocionado de hablar con Austin. Es un tipazo, sinceramente, entonces estoy más que feliz de hablar con él.
Cartelera impresionante la que traemos aquí y sin más vamos a darle la bienvenida. He's Austin Gayle. He's a director of content at Pro Football Focus, right, Austin? That
That's right.
sounds great.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Great.
I just want to say that sick you have looks sick, man. Looks sick. I love your chain. I've seen on Tailgate your podcast. It looks spectacular.
I appreciate that, man. That's awesome to hear.
Okay, let's start with the draft talk because I've seen some of your content. I love it. Your podcast Tailgate, as Diego mentioned, and followed you on Twitter from about the last maybe 3-4 months. I discovered your content, your personal content, farther from PFF. But I would like Diego to start with the questions, and we will follow up with the chat. Okay?
Sweet.
Sure. So it's Hutchinson week. Your podcast. I want to first to kick off this pod. Like, I love to hear a lot about your experience. What did you learn from it, and maybe tell us a little bit more about the project and what did you learn from it.
Yeah, absolutely. It is Hutch Week here at PFF. We released the four-part podcast series with Aidan Hutchinson, and it's been awesome. It's been really fun to put together something like this, right? Sit down with a projected number one overall pick, probably a lock to go inside the top 3 picks in the 2022 NFL Draft. And in addition to getting to know him, right, and learning more about his upbringing and this past season at Michigan, getting to know his family, getting to know his mom, his dad, his sisters, Jim Harbaugh, Don Brown, former teammates like Kwity Paye, Josh Ross. I think it's been really good, right? To get the full scope of a player that's expected to do insane things in the NFL. And you really discover like what it takes, right? What does it take to be a projected number 1 overall pick? What does it take to have the success that he did at Michigan and all that went into that? I think I've learned so much about him and all of that process, right? That I think a lot of people will be excited to listen to it. I think you should definitely check it out wherever you get your podcast. It's also on PFF's YouTube channel. And I think the other piece of it too is that if you're a big Michigan fan, right, there's a lot of value in this one. We sit down and go game by game of the 2021 season with the best player. So it was a lot of fun, and I encourage everyone to check it out.
What are your expectations for Hutchinson this first season? You can see him going first overall to the Jaguars, maybe to the Lions as a local hero, or maybe to the Texans. These are 3 different situations. Which one of them would you see as a better fit for him? What do you expect?
Yeah, it's hard not to say that the Detroit Lions wouldn't be the best fit, right? Keeping him in state. He's from Dearborn, Michigan, obviously played at the University of Michigan. His family is super supportive of him. I think it would be such an easy transition, right? Not a lot of change for Aidan Hutchinson. So I do think there's a lot of value in him going to Detroit, but I think he's going to have success wherever he goes, right? I think he's that, I was talking to someone recently. He has a lot of traits around a player that will last, right? People make comparisons to Jared Allen, Chris Long. Maybe they're not the same athletically, maybe they're not the same stylistically, but those are players that maybe were never the best at their position, right? Maybe they were never, Khalil Mack at his prime or Myles Garrett in his prime, but they stuck around in the NFL and were consistent contributors because I think they had a lot of the traits that make for someone that can last in the NFL. That's work ethic, that's positive effect on culture, that's high-end athletic ability, really good measurables, really good diet. How he treats his body is insane. And I've talked to a lot of prospects about the prioritization around diet and sleep and the gym and all these things. When you're going into the NFL, you have to be in the top 0.5% of the human population to sustain. Like to avoid injury and all that stuff. And he did suffer that injury his junior season, a broken ankle, but he's been relatively healthy outside of that. I think a lot of that is because of his preparation and how much he prioritizes, again, like every detail. He journals every single day. He writes down his goals for the next week, the next month, the next year. And as that process continues to go forward, he just checks off a lot of things, right? He sets goals and achieves goals. And I think there's not a lot like that, right? People talk about uncoachable traits. yeah, his athleticism is uncoachable. His work ethic is uncoachable. But I think his approach and his demeanor and his attention to detail in terms of how do I get better? How do I maximize what I'm capable of? That I do think is also uncoachable.
Sure. And also something I liked from the first episode is that he spoke a little bit about his spirituality, and that's something I really love about his mother being having a great relationship with her. I think that was pretty cool. So I like to continue with another maybe projected first overall pick. That is Truman Walker, and has been pretty hyped up the last days. What do you think about him? What do you think about this hype? Do you think it's legit? And also, how do you think the draft would develop if Trevor Walker is the number one overall pick?
Yeah, Travon Walker is, talking about one of one, an insane athlete, right? I think his measurables and his athletic testing compares best to a Myles Garrett. And the issue is, or not the issue, but the area where you need to project is the production and the role. He did not play a lot of pure outside the tackle edge alignments. He does not have that kind of experience. He doesn't have that kind of production that Myles Garrett had coming out of Texas A&M. And, any defensive line coach in the NFL would say, if you give me him, I could turn him into Myles Garrett. There are a lot of coaches in the NFL that are very confident in their own ability to develop talent. It's why guys like Rashawn Gary, Colton Miller, Austin Jackson, really athletic players get drafted really highly, even though maybe they don't have the production of an Aidan Hutchinson or the production of a George Karlaftis, right? So the NFL is smart to do that. Like, I will never knock the NFL and the league on identifying uncoachable traits as a bigger prioritization or more important in the draft than production and things that aren't necessarily replicable in the NFL without some of these traits. So Travon Walker, to me, is 100% worth the top 5 hype. It's just, you better be really confident that you can turn him into a really good player. And you need to be confident in what's his work ethic. What's his impact on the culture? How quick of a learner is he? Can he come in and retool his entire pass rushing sets? Can he start playing along the edge and have success there? And I haven't had the opportunity to talk to Travon Walker. People that I do like a lot that have talked to Travon Walker have said he's an insane worker. He's a guy that really prioritizes the weight room and all these different things. So that's a big reason why too, that I think teams will willing to bet on him as well.
Where do you fall on this debate on traits versus production? Because I think it's the main issue or the main theme with Walker, right? He has great traits, but not very good production. Where do you personally, and since you work with numbers and statistics, where do you fall on that debate?
Traits are rare.
Production.
Yeah. Traits are rare and more rare than production, right? You look at, and that's why it's more important. I think traits are more important. Your opportunity or your range of outcomes to be an elite Hall of Fame player extends the more athletic and the freakier you are there, right? Like, if you have insane measurables, insane athletic testing, the percentage chance that you are a Hall of Fame talent in the NFL is so much higher than if you have to overcome short arms or low explosiveness or bad agility. If you have to overcome some of these things that you just can't coach, it's that much harder to kind of project Hall of Fame level talent, right? When you look at some of the best that ever have played this game, Calvin Johnson had some of the rarest traits we've ever seen. Julio Jones, JJ Watt, Von Miller. These guys, in addition to being really productive players, were rare trait, types. And I think the reason you're even in the conversation for traits versus production is that I do think that the NFL specifically has a developmental problem. It's very difficult for teams to develop talent, right? If you draft someone in the first round, they have to play. And if they play early on and things don't have success, a coach could get fired in year 2. And then he plays in a different defense. And then he gets a different trainer. And maybe at that point he's traded to another team. It's so difficult to develop raw talent in the NFL. It's especially at quarterback. Quarterback is so difficult to develop in the NFL because if, I'm making things up, but here's a good example. Josh Rosen, a lot of people liked him, right? A lot of people liked him coming out.
Great example.
Trades. He gets drafted by the Cardinals at 10 and doesn't have a really good season, but he's not going to develop. He's off. He traded to Miami, and then Miami doesn't start him, and then he's traded somewhere else. And maybe Josh Rosen was never going to be good in the NFL, but I'll tell you what, did not get a fair shake in terms of development. Even look at Baker Mayfield, right? You have and there's more reasons why, like, he hasn't had success, but like 4 coaches and 4 offensive coordinators in 4 years. Like, it's hard. It's very hard to develop in the NFL when that's not what they prioritize. The NFL prioritizes winning. And if you're not winning, you're going to move on from guys. And that's always an issue.
Since we're on quarterbacks, why don't you ask him about your boy, Diego Reader?
My guy, Desmond Reader. I think he's the number 1 QB in this class. So I'd like to ask you, what is the trait that you like the most about him? Because we know he's a great processor. We know he also has the mobility. What do you think is like the most cool trait that he has, and also why?
Ritter, I think, of any of the quarterbacks in this class, has the best projectable tape and projectable experience. He has NFL throws. He checks his own protections. He's won at a high level. He's, hit, second, third reads and been accurate with the football. I think the concerns are he doesn't have high-end traits. He's a good athlete, but you'd like to see him be a bit heavier, right? I'm concerned a little bit about his weight. He has a good arm, but it's not elite. It's not, Malik Willis levels of arm talent. It's solid, but it's not elite. He's not very accurate with the football, and that's always going to be a concern, right? I think, the comparisons I've made are Marcus Mariota, right? And Marcus Mariota got drafted a lot higher than where Ritter will go, and Marcus Mariota had better production at a bigger school, and that's just, what it was. Ritter is similar in that way, where Mariota was not super accurate, but, played at a high level at Oregon and all that stuff. And you wouldn't lean on him as like a runner, but you would like enjoy that he can run the football. And I think Ritter's in a very good, similar place as well. And it depends what you're after. If you're a team or a front office that's saying, if you draft a quarterback in this class, we'll let him sit for a year, and no matter what, you're going to be coaching this team in 2023. I'd take a Malik Willis. Hell yeah. Because if I have that kind of luxury and I have that kind of leash, give me a year to coach him and I'm there. Now, if front office is like, if you don't win 8 games next year, you're fired, I'm taking Ritter. Because Ritter, I think, is going to have a little bit more success early on, because I think the adjustment's going to be that easier. So that's something that I do think gets under-discussed in this pre-draft process is front office expectations. If the front office is putting the pressure on in that, hey, if you don't win this many games this year, we're probably going to move on. They say that to me, I'm making a lot of short-term decisions. I'm saying, it's similar to the Bears. Look at the Bears last year.
Yeah.
Traded up for Justin Fields, and then they traded up for Tevin Jenkins. Why? Because they knew that seat was hot. They knew if Matt Nagy didn't get a quarterback and Ryan Pace didn't find a way to like really, put things together, they were both gone. And look where they are now, right? Things did not pan out and they're both gone. And Pace, Nagy wanted to start Dalton and then he starts Fields. The whole thing's just a cluster. If the team that is probably in a similar spot and where I think they could be in danger of making more poor short-term decisions is Carolina. Carolina makes this trade for Sam Darnold. They now only have 1 pick inside the top 130 this year, and it's the number 6 overall pick. And there's concerns at quarterback. Does Matt Rule bank on Kenny Pickett coming in or Malik Willis coming in and kind of saving his season? Same with Scott Fitterer. Who knows? And I think they probably do. I think they got to swing a big bat if they're going to like maintain their obviously their coaching status and stuff. So teams that make short-term decisions in the draft, I think oftentimes are on the outside looking in and are overdrafting players at valuable positions. And in turn, there's this cycle of, development and losing that.
The debate at Carolina, it's very juicy to me because the situation they are in, it's very complicated. And having this 1 pick, would you personally recommend to take Kenny Pickett? Do you see him as a viable to patch this whole problem that they have?
Unfortunately, no, right? I'm not super high on Kenny Pickett. And I also don't think that bringing him in and then benching Darnold, who you already traded a second round pick for and all this stuff, like it's just such inconsistent roster construction that I don't think it ultimately helps them. The best case scenario for the Carolina Panthers at 6 is they trade down because this team isn't that good and they need more help on the offensive line. They need more talent on defense. They need multiple playmakers. And if I'm Matt Rule, I'd rather bank on Sam Darnold slightly, improving year 2 in Carolina and trading down and adding multiple impact players in this draft than I am hitching my complete wagon to Kenny Pickett and benching Sam Darnold. And then you have more, concern and more inconsistency under center. It doesn't help that they fired Joe Brady. you think about Sam Darnold's development. He has Joe Brady for the first portion of the season, then he moves on. I mean, it's you talk about a team that's going through a lot of inconsistency. That's tough, right? I think Carolina is making a lot of bad decisions right now because they're desperate and they're pressured to do so. It's similar to the Chicago Bears, if I'm being honest.
Sure. Yeah. So I like to go with one of your guys. Like we spoke last June, and I asked you about your guys, and this is Boye Mafe. You talking about Boye Mafe, and you told me he was going to be to have a great 2021 season. So is he one of your guys entering these drafts? And also, what do you think are his most translatable traits in the NFL? Seeing him have a great PFF pass rush win rate, I think speaks pretty well to him.
Yeah, I really like Boye Mafe. I think I'm concerned a bit about the arm length. I think I expected him to be a bit longer than that. That's always going to concern me when you're projecting like high end output, but like explosive athlete that I think goes in the first 40 picks. Like, I don't think he sneaks past. I think there's a good chance he goes in the first round, but I definitely think he's a top of day 2 type of selection, right? I really think that will be the case. So I'm really excited about Boye Mafe. I think some of my other guys in this class, Sky Moore, Western Michigan, I'm a huge fan of his. I really like Bo Melton, who I think at the top of day 3. If Bo Melton of Rutgers, a receiver, plays the slot, I think he's going to play the slot in the NFL, is available in the round 4. That's a huge win for whatever team brings him in, because I think he's a really productive player that's in the right situation can have some success. I like some of the interior offensive line players in this class too, like Cole Strange of Chattanooga. I think it's interesting. Darian Kennard of Kentucky, Dylan Parham of Memphis, Marquise Hayes, Oklahoma. I think there's some starters at those positions too that you can get on day 2, day 3. And then off-ball linebacker, I think is one of the deepest position groups in this class. Like, you're telling me I can have Devin Lloyd in the top 20 or Darian Beavers in round 4. I'm taking Beavers because I think Beavers can start. Like, I think it's a really good off-ball linebacker class that I'll often be thinking if I'm a team in round 1, considering Devin Lloyd of Utah or Nakobe Dean of Georgia, I'll say, hey, wait a second. If I can get Brandon Smith of Penn State or Chad Muma, Wyoming. I talked to the Montana State kid today, Troy Anderson. He got recruited to Montana State to play linebacker. 3 days before camp or whatever, they said, hey, we need you to play running back. He goes and plays running back. And then his sophomore season, they say, hey, we need you to play quarterback. He plays quarterback sophomore season. And then he ends up playing quarterback these last 2 years. And then 2020, obviously you have the COVID impacted season. And then he's like, okay, now we actually need you to play linebacker. And he's one of the best linebackers in the state. He is a special, special dude and a special, special athlete. Troy Anderson does not get out of the second round, in my opinion. And that's with being a small school kid who's only played the position for a year. You go back to he graduated with like 80 people in Montana, which is so small compared to where I'm from in California. But like, he's a special kid too, that I think has a good head on his shoulders.
Great. I really enjoyed your conversation with prospects, because you get access to this kind of stories, this kind of curiosities that you have. Do you have anyone that you can share with us here from recent chats that you have?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the Troy Anderson one was interesting. Zion Johnson is another one where like he wanted to be a golfer. Like, he grew up like wanting to be a golfer and was really good. And there was a point in his like golfing career where like he made this commitment to play football and thought that he prioritized it. Now he might be a first round pick. Like, it's crazy to think that he was legitimately trying to go pro in golf at a very young age and had a lot of success. He's obviously a still really good golfer, but it's always interesting hearing players that didn't prioritize football a ton growing up and then make this transition. George Karloftis, who I've also talked to in this class, was on the Greek water polo team at 12 years old, like the national water polo team. That's insane. Wow. To do that as a young age is banana land. Bernard Ryman didn't start playing football until he found a football outside on the street and asked what it was in Austria. Like that, like again, like some of these stories, man, I agree. Luis, I really appreciate you saying that. Like, I really enjoy the human aspect of this too, right? I think the NFL does a really good job of gamifying the draft, right? Where it's like, these are my top 5 receivers. This is what they look like. But at a certain point, like, you're drafting human beings. You're drafting with guys with different stories and stuff like that. And I think you can find, and I've learned a lot about that in this process with Aidan Hutchinson. You get to know some of these guys. You can kind of get a really good understanding of who has the traits to last in the NFL and stick around and really produce at the next level.
Sure. And also, I'd like to speak about you to speak about the personality of Nick Bonito, because I think he's a great player. I think he's one of my guys of this NFL draft, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about his personality, because I saw you recently talk with him. So I love to hear a bit more about what do you think about his personality and the human aspect of him.
Which player was that?
Nick Bonito.
Oh, Nick Bonito. Yeah, Nick Bonito is really cool. I think he's coming out as a true junior, I believe, or redshirt sophomore, one of those things, and he was not eligible because he didn't to go to the award show, like or not the award show, the All-Star Bowl. So he couldn't go to the Senior Bowl or the East West Shrine Bowl. I think he would have dominated there, and I think if he went there, we'd be talking about him a lot more. He was super productive at Oklahoma. The concerns are that teams see him as a very light player. Right? Like he's 248 pounds soaking wet. And to play edge in the NFL, there is this like 250-pound threshold that a lot of teams view. And when I talked to him, he said, some teams see me as, stand-up off-ball linebacker where I'm not hand in the ground playing defensive end, kind of like I did at Oklahoma. And that always concerns me, right? Tweener types concern me. It goes back to the developmental stuff, right? He goes to one team, he's going to play linebacker. He goes to another team, he's going to play defensive end. And then say the defense coordinator gets fired or hired somewhere else, and it's harder to develop them. That, in my opinion, could be the concern with Bonito that kind of drives him down boards. But he's an insane athlete. I think he's, an overly productive player. And I think he's got a good, good demeanor about him too. He's going to have to go into the right system, somewhere where you have to hope there's like a stable line of coaching and stable line of people that will play him in the right position. And honestly, like let him rush the passer on passing downs. But he's probably going to have to carve out this role where he's a bit of a designated pass rusher, right? And maybe not playing early downs against the run early in his career until like some NFL team finds a way to add some weight to his frame, which is easier said than done. I think you could argue that his frame might be a little bit maxed out. It's hard to, get beyond that if, the years he's had at Oklahoma hasn't put him over 250. But I still think he's a, really intriguing prospect that I like on day two.
Perfect. Every one of us has their own view of the players. Which ones would you say you have ranked very differently from the overall consensus? Maybe too high, maybe too low. Give us maybe two or three that you have different.
I think I'm a lot lower on Jermaine Johnson than others. Jermaine Johnson right now, I think, is a lock to be a top 10 pick. According to a lot of sports books, I think Atlanta is going to consider him at 8. He's an older prospect, will play his rookie season at 24 years old, and just was not like overly productive at Florida State. And I like the athlete. I like the length. I like the power. I still feel that it needed to show up a lot more for me. He ranked outside the top 110 on a list of edge rushers and true pass rush win rate this past year. Like that, in my opinion, is just not really projectable production. And he had a really good Senior Bowl, and I think that's a big reason why he rocketed up boards and teams were excited about him. He was such a good Senior Bowl that he didn't even play the last practice and all that stuff. But I think he's not a top 10 player for me. I'd rather have Karlaftis and Ebiketie, the Penn State edge defender, over Jermaine Johnson, honestly, which I think should be more of a common take. But I think he's one that I'm a little bit lower on. A player maybe I'm higher on. I'm high on Chris Olave. I think Olave is the second best receiver in this class, and I could see him playing to the level of Calvin Ridley in an offense, obviously before the suspension, where he's winning down the football field, winning the valuable routes, and a perfect complement to maybe a receiver that has more yak ability and gets a lot of the short intermediate stuff.
Yeah, I like it. So using your pass rush win rate, we can see Jermaine Johnson has 14.1% and Karlaftis has 23.8%. So it's a great difference. And I don't know, why is George Karlaftis falling that far in the draft? And do you think he can be the steal of the NFL draft of the first round?
I do think teams are concerned with his bend. I don't love his bend. I think that's why I really compared him to Justin Tuck, who I think had inside-outside versatility and was like almost exclusively a power rusher, right? Like he was going to eat the man in front of him or he's not going to get there, right? He's not a guy that bends the corner and flashes that insane speed, but his get off is really good. He's explosive as hell. But in terms of turning the corner and bending purely from edge alignments, I think that's where teams kind of slow down a little bit. But I don't get it. I don't get why you're not looking to invest in a player that has insane work ethic, insane production, insane explosiveness. I think bend is properly rated, and I'd be concerned drafting players that don't have it. But I think a lot of his explosiveness and stuff makes up for it.
Perfect. Well, finally, to let you go, I would like to make some propositions to you, and yay or nay, just like that.
Yeah,
Just tell me, Kayvon Thibodeau, will he fall off the first five picks of the first round?
absolutely not. I do not.
It would be a
Any
mistake, right?
any negative media on Kayvon Thibodeau is coming from teams drafting outside the top five. Like
Yeah.
honestly, it has to be. It has to
It
be.
has to be,
It
right?
has to
Yeah.
be. I
Yeah.
don't I don't see it. I don't see it. I don't see why he gets past the Jets and the Giants. Like if he's falling outside the top five, I think that's just bad. I just don't agree.
Yeah.
On the counterpart, Travon Walker, is he taken inside the first three picks of this draft?
Yes. There's not just smoke there, there's fire. I think he could go as high as one. Honestly do. I think he
Oh,
could
great.
be a
Oh,
overall pick. I think he could if he doesn't go one, he's probably gonna go two. If he doesn't go two, he's gonna go three. The league is really high on him, really high on Travon Walker. And it comes back to again, like I want a guy that I think can be a Hall of Famer. And maybe he's not as good as Aidan Hutchinson is right now, or as good as Kayvon Thibodeau is right now, but I think he can be a Hall of Famer. I'm going to bet on that.
great. What about Derek Stingley? He gets picked before Matt Garner, on your mind?
I don't think so. The league loves Ahmad Garner. Ahmad Garner's awesome, and they're right to like him. I'm not. I think both of those corners are top 10 players, but I think Ahmad Garner does go higher. I think he's a perfect fit for the Giants at 7. I think he could go to the Jets at 10. Honestly, I think his floor is the Jets at 10. If Ahmad Garner slips outside the top 10, someone's doing something wrong. Like that's another player where I don't see him going that far. And then for Stingley, I think his floor is probably 12 the Minnesota Vikings. The Houston Texans sprint the card in at 13. The Ravens go get Derek Stingley at 14. I think there's a chance Stingley also goes in the top 10. He'd go, any of those teams picking there, but I think Gardner does go first when it's all said and
done. Two more for me. Over under 3 quarterbacks drafted in the first round.
That is the perfect line. I would if I could bet it, I'd say exactly 3 because I know I know Pickett, Willis, and I think Ritter are going to go in the first round. I'd probably say over, but I honestly would bet probably under 3.5. I'd bet under 3.5. I'd say over 3. That's where my head is at because I think Ritter goes higher than people think, and I think Willis and Pickett are potentially top 15 players as well when it's all said and done. Then it just comes back to does a team like Detroit at 32 take a flyer on one of these guys? Does a team trade back into the first round?
Yeah, that's my
Corral or Howell, but I don't think that many quarterbacks should go in the first round. But I think it's that's just the nature of the position, right?
Yeah. That's the scenario, right? Someone on the second round goes back to in the first to have that 5th-year option. That's the scenario for more than 3 in my mind as well. And the last one, 5 receivers over or under in the first round.
Over. I think it's 6 or 7.
Oh, really? Wow.
I think that many receivers do go. I think it's obvious that Drake London of USC, Garrett Wilson, Ohio State, Chris Olave, Ohio State, Treylon Burks, Arkansas. I think then George Pickens goes. I think
Jameson.
There's a good that Christian Watson goes. There's a good chance that Jameson Williams goes. Right. I over 5. I think over 5. I think the line right now is around about 5.5, 6. I like that over a lot.
Yeah.
Great. That's it for me. Diego, do you have anyone?
No, man. I just really appreciate your grind, and I really appreciate everything you've done. And thanks so much for being here. I think you're a great person and a person I look up to. So thanks so much for being here, and keep that grind going, man.
Anytime, guys. I really appreciate the time.
Yeah, Austin, thanks a lot for being here. Let me say something in Spanish to our audience. Amigos, si ustedes no han seguido el trabajo de Austin Gayle, por favor, háganlo. Vayan y descarguen el podcast nuevo que tiene acerca de Aidan Hutchinson con todo el contenido de toda su vida, en realidad, más allá de como jugador de NCAA, tiene todo lo que ustedes están esperando de conocer del que probablemente será el próximo primer pick. Austin, thank you very much for your presence here, for your time, for your generosity, and see you next time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Listo, mi querido Diego, muchísimas gracias por haber estado por acá, por haber conseguido esta entrevista, porque han de ustedes
Placer.
saber, amigos, que aquí Diego fue el booker de esta entrevista.
Un placer, como les dije, creo que Austin Gayle es una gran persona. Hablé con él en junio pasado
Ujú,
y estuvimos ahí en mi podcast, un podcast de NFL, lo pueden checar también por ahí si les da curiosidad. Yo era
ujú.
todavía un nene y ahí nos hicimos amigos, me dio varios consejos sobre, pues que aprendiera varias cosas y como su carrera, lo que había hecho en San Diego State, todo ese tipo de cosas, la verdad me ayudaron muchísimo y es una de las personas a las que más como sigo y tomo consejos de su parte. Entonces, gracias Luis por haberme acompañado y por haber sido una gran dupla en esta entrevista.
Perfecto, cuando gustes y muchísimas gracias a todos ustedes por haber estado por acá. Déjenos sus comentarios, sus preguntas. ¿Les gustó este tipo de contenido? Sabemos que ahí está un poco la barrera del lenguaje, que pues no está tan fácil de superar, pero pues también háganoslo saber, así de pues no inventen cómo hacen eso, o más, venga más, o sea, denos un poco de feedback para que sepamos por dónde va la cosa, ¿sale? Muchísimas gracias a todos. Esto fue On The Clock y nos vemos la próxima. Bye bye.